as we move through summer, through from June to July and then on into August, sometimes the main flower displays in your flower borders have come to an end. The lupins are over, the delphiniums are over, and there's a bit of a gap in flowering. And this is when I like to think that my patio comes into full swing with a lot of bulbs planted in pots. On the left and right of me, I've got these lovely doubled flowered rose lilies. You'll find a video on my channel all about growing lilies in pots, and these give you wonderful displays and some height to your patio pots. But one bulb which comes from South Africa, which I do like growing in my patio pots and sometimes in my borders as well, provided you've got a sunny position, is Galtonia. And this white flowered variety is Galtonia candicans, and its common name is sometimes the Summer Hyacinth. And one reason I love this bulbous plant is that it flowers round about the end of July through August, and it fills what is commonly called the August colour gap. There can be a delay between the onset of autumn flowering plants. The early summer ones have finished, the autumn ones haven't really started, but Galtonia fills that August colour gap by coming into full flower. Now, this is a bulbous plant. It grows from a bulb. You'll plant it in the spring, and in a pot I'll probably plant about 5, maybe 6 bulbs in a large 12-14 inch pot, and it can grow to a good metre, at least 4 foot, sometimes a little bit higher if it's got really good growing conditions and the bulbs are really established. So plant in the spring, grow the bulbs in pots. They're quite hardy, but you could put them outside really once warm conditions have started. So I usually start them off in the springtime, plant the bulbs around about March to April time, get them going, and once weather conditions are warmed up through May into early June, I'll move those pots outside onto my patio, and then the stems will grow up and I'll get these beautiful flowering stems developing towards the middle end of summer, around about July into August. Now, the flower spikes themselves grow quite tall. The strapped-like narrow leaves are much lower down on the plant, and at the tips of each of these stems you'll get a selection of 20, 25 or more of these lovely nodding white bell-shaped flowers. They start opening at the bottom of the spike and gradually they open in succession as we get up towards the tip. So you'll get flowering over several weeks as the Galtonia puts on its wonderful summer show. There is another variety of Galtonia I have grown before, which is called Galtonia viridiflora. Again, it grows from a bulb. Don't think it's quite as hardy as Galtonia candicans, and it has a lime green flower to it. So again, a really lovely bulb from South Africa, which you can grow in pots for your summer displays. These are a range of rose lily double flowered lilies, and aren't they absolutely glorious? I've got a mixture of different name varieties here, and these doubled flowered ones are so impressive with layer after layer of beautiful petals. This is a new lily I've planted this year called Lilium lechliniae. I planted the bulbs early in spring and they've grown up taller than me now, the height of summer during July. It produces tall stems covered with multiple flowers, each of these golden flowers with beautiful blackish brown speckled markings on its petals. It's absolutely glorious, and the flowers just hang daintily, producing a display like this which will last for several weeks to brighten up my patio. Another favourite dwarf variety of lily I grow in a pot is this one called Garden Party, a lovely dwarf variety with a golden band across the centre of the flower, brushed with an apricot pink colour down the centre of each petal. Beautiful little speckled, freckled markings on it as well. This is a perfect variety to go in a patio pot. Probably reaches about 2 foot in height, so certainly one if you're growing it in a pot to put towards the front of your patio displays. It will continue flowering in my garden here in the East Midlands through July and into early August, giving you probably 4 to 6 weeks of colour before I'll deadhead and move the pots away and let the bulbs die down naturally over the course of the coming months. One word of warning when it comes to growing lilies: you do have to be careful about the pollen. The pollen which is produced generously on the blooms, like I said, the hoverflies do adore it, but it is poisonous to cats. So if you've got cats, be very, very careful about growing lilies, because if they get the pollen on their fur and they lick it off, it can be extremely poisonous. Now, if you do love lilies, then you can actually go over the flowers and trim off, cut off the pollen sacs, get rid of the pollen completely, and that means that the flowers will be safe. You can also do the same thing if you want to actually cut some of these lily blooms and bring them indoors to enjoy them for an indoor display. The alternative is that you can grow pollen-free varieties of lilies. Things like the double-flowered rose lily variety are very good, although even some of those can produce pollen, but the double-flowered varieties, the flowers don't open fully and therefore there's no pollen exposed, and they should be safe to grow if you've got cats around your garden. Otherwise, if you want to grow lilies safely, again, just pop over the flowers as soon as they open, just trim off the pollen sacs, and the flowers will then not produce pollen which will get on the cat's fur. Just bear in mind that all parts of the lily are poisonous, so if your cats do start nibbling plants, those could be poisonous, and perhaps avoid growing lilies altogether. And something else to look out for when you're choosing the lilies to grow in your garden is look for those varieties which have received a very special award from the flower experts at the Royal Horticultural Society, and Garden Party has been awarded the Award of Garden Merit, a real accolade for a lily. It just shows it's a garden worthy variety. It will grow well in the patio, and lots of varieties of lilies have received an Award of Garden Merit. So check in the plant catalogues and see if your favourite varieties have got it. It's certainly worth searching out these award-winning plants when choosing things to grow in your garden, whether that's flowers, fruits, vegetables, trees, shrubs, whatever it is. The Royal Horticultural Society has awarded lots of garden plants this very special award, and it means they're going to be the best performing plants to grow in your garden. That's why I've chosen Garden Party as one of my favourite dwarf lilies for my patio pots. Now, as well as growing lilies in pots and the Galtonias or the Summer Hyacinth, I also have a selection of Eucomis or pineapple lilies in pots. And again, these are really good on a sunny patio. They will grow up and give you flowering display probably through July, August and September, and even the seed heads can look quite attractive on these. This is a dwarf variety called Eucomis layer. I think it might have been bred from a Eucomis called mureliae, but it's a dwarf compact variety, and it has a lovely speckled stem, these beautiful heads of pink flowers, called the pineapple lily because of this little crown of leaves just at the tip of the shoot, which are reminiscent of a pineapple. So Eucomis are good in pots, whether you want a dwarf variety like this to grow in a pot to put in the centre of your garden table, or taller growing varieties. One of the most popular varieties and readily available Eucomis bulbs is Eucomis bicolour, available as a bulb to plant in the spring. Again, start mine off in my unheated greenhouse and I move the pots outside for the summer. I love this little Eucomis layer. I bought this as a plant and then you can pot these up every year, and the bulbs soon reproduce every year. You'll find that one bulb has turned into two and two into four, and you'll gradually find that you can split and divide those up into more than one pot. Eucomis Sparkling Burgundy is another lovely flowering variety. Grows to about 3 to 4 foot in height, needs a little bit of support through the growing season because those flower heads can be quite heavy, so it's certainly worth giving them some canes for support. And there's a host of other Eucomis that you can find, all perfect in pots, good for a sunny position and great on patios. Now, as far as pests and problems are concerned, I don't find anything causes problems with the pineapple lilies or Eucomis. I don't find they get green fly or black fly. I don't find that the slugs or snails particularly bother them, but just check them regularly and find out. However, with the Galtonias, you can find that the leaves are very attractive to slugs and snails, so I'd certainly keep an eye out for those. And maybe if you're growing them in pots, put a ring of copper tape around the pot to stop the slugs and snails crawling up the sides of the pots and reaching the leaves. But otherwise, they're pretty trouble free and will put on a lovely display of blooms in the summer. After flowering, I just tend to let the bulbs die down naturally where they're growing in the garden, and keep feeding and watering, especially things in pots. They rely on you to provide the nutrients by extra fertiliser supplements through the growing season. And then I move the pots just to a very sheltered position. My Galtonia, sometimes I'll just leave in the pot outside in a sheltered position behind my arch for the winter. Make sure it doesn't get too waterlogged though, so you might just want to turn the pot on its side. The bulbs will die down naturally, and I leave the bulbs in the compost for the winter. Or you can move them like these Eucomis to an unheated greenhouse, or maybe even into your shed. Let them die down completely. I leave the bulbs in the pots, and maybe every other year or so I'll knock them out of the pots in the spring, at about March into April, remove the bulbs from all the old compost, clean them up and replant them. They are quite hardy, but I wouldn't want to get wet and waterlogged and cold during the winter, so a sheltered position can be good for them. One other flowering bulb we might like to try is the peacock flower, or the Abyssinian Gladiolus, sometimes called Gladiolus calianthus, and also sometimes listed as Acidanthera mureliae. So check either both, Acidanthera or Gladiolus calianthus, and you'll find this lovely plant. Grows from a little corm, a bit like a gladioli. You'll plant them in the spring. If you plant them outside, they'll flower later. If you want to get earlier flowers, then plant them in pots in the greenhouse and plant the plants out into your borders later in the summer. And they'll produce long sword-like leaves, a bit like a gladiolus, through the summer, and then start flowering around about August into September time, producing these lovely heads of nodding white flowers. So they're beautiful markings on them. They'll add height to your flower border and give a nice display to add that late summer autumn colour to your garden. Now, these are not fully hardy. A bit like gladioli, you can't leave them in the soil. They'll rot off in the cold and wet of winter. You could try lifting them and storing the little corms and replanting them the next year, but even that isn't always successful. So it might be one of those flowering corms or flowering bulbs you'll buy every year, plant them up and enjoy the lovely peacock flowers, adding some height and some impact to your late summer and autumn borders. So I hope that's given you a few ideas for colourful bulbous growing plants which you grow on your patio to fill that summer colour gap, whether that's lilies, little pots of pineapple lily or Eucomis, or the lovely summer hyacinth, Galtonia candicans. Try your hand at growing something new, and you'll have something different to traditional summer bedding plants for your patio pots, and something which will give you height, impact, and really create a talking point.